Welcome to Breakthrough Ideas in Training webinar series. I'm Evan Hackle. I'm the chairman of Total Training. We are thrilled and delighted to have with us Keith Halperin. He is a senior partner at Korn Ferry. Welcome to our event. As I do with, good to have you here. As I do with everyone, just tell us a little bit about your background. Tell us a little bit about Korn Ferry's background, particularly because I think most people don't quite understand how big a company Korn Ferry is in the training space.
Right. Yeah, absolutely, Evan. Yeah, Korn Ferry is over $1 billion organization, and probably most of you know Korn Ferry as a search firm, and that is about a third of the Korn Ferry practice. We're really interested in the whole leadership development space, including identifying effective leaders, then the search part of our business, and we have a large part of the business that is on leadership training and consulting and building the bench strength of leaders in organizations. And I'm part of the practice. I don't do search. I'm part of the organization that works with leaders to improve their competence and their leadership skills.
Sounds fabulous. So why don't we just start there with leadership? How does Korn Ferry develop leaders?
Yeah, a number of ways. And I think some of the things that we've talked about that may differentiate us in terms of that leadership development space is really taking a very holistic approach in thinking about how you develop leaders. Our belief is that training should not be a single event, but really development is a journey. And training is a part of that journey, and it also has to be done within the context. It's not good enough to just look at specific discrete skills, but then how do you really think about what does that business need, what do the leaders need in that business, and how do you build that leadership journey that links to what's important to them and where they have a chance to apply those skills and experiences right on the job. So we look for those development opportunities that involve training, that involve experience, that involve immersion, and it all comes together as a whole cloth for development.
Could you share maybe some examples of some of those type of things that you guys do?
Sure. Well, one example, for instance, is an organization we've been working with for a number of years, and we're looking at high potential people that would be moving into the general manager ranks. And the general manager job is a real pivotal job for this particular organization. So they're putting special emphasis on that group. We really started by identifying what do effective general managers in this organization need. And then after we did that, we developed an assessment tool to assess these high potential leaders. And the program included that assessment tool and feedback from the assessment. From there, we moved into training modules around those critical skills. Then we built what's often called action learning projects, where teams would have to work on a real life issue back in the organization over a 12-week period. In the middle of that 12-week period, they went through an immersion program. One of the things this organization was focusing on is building up their business in emerging markets. So this group went to an emerging market and spent 2 days in that market, learning about that market, understanding how business is done in that emerging market, and then bringing that back into the classroom. And there continued the training on what they've learned and how to build that business, and they presented that out to senior leaders. So senior leaders got to hear their insights, their knowledge, their learning about leading in an emerging market space. So you can see how it's a journey, not an event, and it's linked to what the organization needs.
I have a feeling that you made almost everybody watching jealous, because
yes.
the issue of how do you get the support to make something like that really work.
Right.
But I want to highlight, if I can, at the very beginning of what you talked about, because I do think personally it's something that's missed, and that is determining who the superstars are and benchmarking why they're superstars, and really understanding that, because a lot of times people move to, well, what are the skill sets, not what are the skill sets of the people.
Yes.
and matching the two. And I just wanted to point that out to everyone because I think that's really a great thing. And I love the whole concept. And I'm going to skip a little bit on our questions here, but how do you get an organization to understand and value doing something that big?
Let me answer that. Then I want to go back and say something about the identifying people for a
Sure,
second.
go right ahead.
But in terms of you obviously need a champion inside the organization, as you do in most kind of change initiatives. And I think you need to make sure that the development is linked to where is the organizational pain? What's the need? Going back to that one example again, that we were able to identify that the general management position was a real pivotal position for the success of that organization, and it took a lot of diverse skills to be effective in that position. They also were able to identify that a lot of general managers were moving into that role and not successful. So
Yeah,
there was a pain point, and we're able to talk to the successful ones, and all of them said we need to develop people earlier if we're going to be successful in moving them into that role. So we got a critical mass of senior people in the organization say, here's some pain, here's an important issue. And then it was easy to back in and say, let's look at how we can develop leaders to achieve that.
yeah,
Uh, so again, who's the champion? What's the problem you're trying to solve in the organization? What's the pain? Show them that here's a way to help resolve that. Seems to work. The other interesting thing, going back to your comment about identifying, because that's always a challenge. How are you sure you're identifying the right people? And this was a evolution in this organization, because again we did a fairly thorough evaluation and assessment as part of the program,
yeah,
but then we shared the feedback from that assessment with the people in the talent organization. And the very first time we did the program, we had some mixed results in terms of that assessment. And what we were able to do is use that assessment as a way to back into making sure they're selecting the right people for that program. So then the second time and the third time we did the program, the caliber of people got better and better
right.
because there was that feedback loop
Yeah,
on the people they were selecting.
yeah, that sounds fantastic. And that sounds like a terrific program designed for a specific need.
Yes.
Let's go broader
Okay.
and look at what are the types of ideas you could share with everyone here on how to help just sort of the overall organization be more effective.
I think that in terms of the overall organization, and again, our focus is mostly on leaders in the organization, and we look at leaders in four different dimensions around leadership. There's experience, and what are the key experiences that those leaders have, and how do we help people in leadership roles throughout the organization get some of those critical experiences that they need. We also look at traits, and hear and be able to identify. And I believe there are some common traits across leaders that they need in order to be successful. So we can look at what are those common traits across leaders, across industries, and that may be a way to help leaders throughout the organization be successful. We also need to pay attention to the drivers. As you probably know, leading is hard work.
Yes,
It takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of passion. And so to try to understand, do those people really have the drive to really want to do it, or are they doing it because they're told to, or it's the next step on the ladder? So I think it's important to help organizations look at those factors as well. And then finally, looking at what are those competencies or skills that are needed. So thinking about helping them identify the right experiences, what's the style or personality that's critical across leaders, the drive to be leaders, and then the competencies. And we can build programs to help organizations do all of that. Then I think we're upping the game for all leaders.
everybody. So what are those? Just share some of those key attributes of good leaders from your point of view?
Yeah, one of the things, a big thing, and in fact, we've done a fair amount of research in this area, as others have done, is, for instance, learning agility. Because leaders moving into new situations, often moving into the unknown and to uncertainty and ambiguity, need to be able to adjust. They need to be able to learn from past experiences, but then apply that in brand new situations. And For instance, again, we have some methodology to assess learning agility, and then to teach it, and then to help leaders be able to become more flexible, more agile, more able to handle these first-time situations. So that would be certainly one example. Other things that we know are critical around leadership is building a high level of trust with
Yep.
the people that you're leading, and ways of doing that. Certainly in today's world, innovation, creating a culture for innovation is important, and being able to lead change with everything going on is important. So those are some of the examples of some of those key competencies that we could train around and really build leadership skills.
You said some things here that I think are really important because when I think of your company,
Hmm.
and I have a very good friend, by the way, that works in your training division, so I know your company from him, and I
Great.
have tremendous respect. I don't think people really quite understand the depth of the research that you guys do and that expertise that you bring that other people just can't duplicate
Yeah.
because you don't think this is the right thing. You know this is the right thing
Yeah.
because you do the research. And
Yeah.
maybe talk a little bit about how you go about doing that and the depth of the work you guys do to learn.
Yeah. Um, yeah. We have. Uh, I'm a PhD psychologist, and we have, probably more than 300 PhDs in our organization. It kind of feels like a mini university at times. And,
Yeah,
and we have a part of the organization is the Korn Ferry Institute. And that's the institute that does a lot of the research. And what's nice about it is we're able to really take applied situations and put some rigorous research behind it. So, for example, we part of our business is assessing leaders. Again, not in the search part of the business, but in the leadership development part of the business, we do psychological and business assessments. We see more than 10,000 executives a year around the world. And,
yeah,
and what we do with those assessments is we're able to then mine the data, and we're able to go back to the organization and get some criterion information about success. We can then look at the data, and then from all of that pull together what does it really take for leaders to be successful. So we're fairly confident that we've got great depth of wisdom, because we all of the information that we use we will then turn into research information, and of course it's confidential because it's gathered in group settings. But we know what makes for effective leaders. We just
yeah.
recently put together a brand new survey, a brand new psychological test for leaders because of all of that research we've developed over the years. So we continuously improve and continuously up our game in terms of both training and assessment.
Well, and I think it's fabulous and kind of interesting because as your business grows, you just keep learning more and more and more,
Exactly,
which,
exactly.
which
Yeah.
is fabulous. I'd love for a moment here for you to talk about maybe the changes you've seen in the world of training, and maybe a little bit about what you think might be coming down the road.
Yeah, and and what I think said at the beginning is some of the things I see in terms of changes in training, things that we're trying to do. It used to be. I remember years ago when. And we had I was working with an organization. We had a 13-day in a row training program. If you think about GE way back when in Crotonville, and they still have Crotonville, but they would have 2-week long programs at Crotonville. My sense is the time of the 2-week out of the office training program is probably almost over, if not totally
I,
over.
I, I hate to tell you, it's not as over as you think it is.
Ah, okay.
And it's very typical for us when we see clients and such. is to say, no, you've got to break this up, and it's just too much to expect people to learn.
Exactly.
But
Exactly.
but there are so many companies out there, particularly because our area of specialty is franchising, which is a little different.
Right.
And there are a lot of franchise organizations that start with 2 or 3 week onboarding and starting programs, and it's overwhelmed for people. But I agree with you completely. It's too much,
Yeah,
and
and I think a lot of organizations are finding that, and particularly at that leadership level. So I think that part of what is changing and what will probably continue to change is one, chunking the programs. That's a technical term. I hope you understand it.
it's not a soup.
Yeah, it's like soup, right? Right. It's much better than just broth. It's, chunking the programs into those small modules. One example, and a number of examples where we do that, we'll have, instead of one 2 week program, if we are able to get that much time with our participants, we'll break it down into 3 day or 2 day modules. Also, the importance of learning on the job and at work, but have that learning be guided. You always hear that comment about most of the learning happens on the job, and probably familiar with the CCL, 70% of the learning happens on the job and 30 through training programs. I think that's true, but I don't think that just by having experience people learn.
Yeah.
I think people need to reflect on that experience, and they need to get some coaching in order to learn from that experience. In fact, they find a difference between a 22% learning if you just get thrown into an experience versus an over 80% learning if there's some coaching or development or guiding around the experience you're having. So I think chunking, I think then having appropriate experiences on the job with some facilitation, with some guidance, with some coaching, so people can really grow from those experiences, and having kind of multimedia approaches are probably things that are happening, will continue to happen. Online learning, not just online learning, but blending online learning with classroom, with on-the-job experiences, all with the result of clear people doing their job better, and you can see it on
Yeah.
the job because they're working on projects on the job.
Yeah. I think that's brilliant. I'm going to ask you a really tough question now.
Oh,
Sometimes in organizations, the learning on the job fails because the
hmm
people that are there now have the wrong attitude, have been poorly trained, and have the wrong habits. How do you deal with that?
in this type of leadership development
Yeah,
context.
yeah, or in any. I mean, you're working with a company, and maybe the term might be culture change,
hmm
might be the right term for this, but where it's not just who you're teaching and bringing in, but you have issues with the people there
that
that
oh
they,
that are in the organization
that are
around
in the organization that have bad habits.
yeah.
That you don't want them to do that training because they're going to train people not in the right way,
Mhm.
but they'll make them many negative, not productive people.
Yeah, I think if I understand you right, I remember really getting caught up in that because I was working with a group of participants, and of course I was then asking them to go back to their boss and to get some information about X, Y, and Z. And when they came back the next time, I discovered that they didn't do any of that, or the people who tried it got stiff-armed.
Yeah,
And then I discovered, oh, well, you can't provide the training out of context and then throw them back in that same dirty swimming pool and expect that they're now going to be clean and not get any germs. So I think it really is important, whether it is the trainer or someone else who's a champion in that organization, to work with the people around the organization to provide that support, to ensure that they know what the outcome is of this leadership program, what the expectations are, and what their role is in supporting. Oftentimes, I am able to do kind of executive overviews.
yeah,
And we do an overview for the executives of, here's the program, here's what's going to happen. And then we spend some time saying, let's talk about what your role is in this process. There are times where I'm able to coach executives one-on-one. So we've got a group of participants, and I can talk to the executive about their role, about the participants, about what's going to happen. So having that one-on-one coaching. Likewise, if we do action learning projects and there's an internal sponsor that's working on that project, it's really critical for that sponsor to get coached on what's your role as a sponsor,
Yeah.
what you should be doing, how are you going to support this team that's going through this action learning assignment and project. So yes, to somehow make sure you're touching people outside of the quote the classroom. And the last thing around that I try to do is to make sure that whatever we're trying to teach or promote in the classroom can be done by those folks without getting permission. So as long as it's skills that they can learn, it's a style they can adapt, but they don't need to go back and ask the organization, is it okay to do this? Then you have a better chance of being successful than if you're teaching something that they have to go back and then get permission to implement.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. Get the buy-in early, which is one of the toughest things.
Yes.
Um, Sort of on this point, maybe slightly different, but one of the difficulties people have in training is ROI. How do you determine, is it a
Yeah.
good return on investment? And always it's so difficult because it's not like the organization's frozen and the only thing you've changed is training.
Exactly.
So how do you justify it? But when we were talking sort of in advance of this, you were saying there are other ways that you can show a return other than a literal ROI, and
Right.
maybe share some of those
Okay.
with
Yeah.
everyone on the webinar.
And so one thing that comes to mind is I was working in an organization. I was working with some of the marketing folks, and one of the marketing guys for this company sponsored a NASCAR. So they had the company's name on the NASCAR and all of that, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners know that type of sponsorship. And I said, well, what's the return on investment for that? And he had no clue.
Yeah.
How are you going to have a clue? So there's a part of me that feels that people in our profession feel terribly guilty that we can't come up with an ROI, and if we, financial ROI. And if we look at our brethrens in the marketing area, if we look at people in IT who give everyone new computers, well, what's the return on investment of that new computer? Well, I think they're going to work better. How do you know that? Well, they don't know that. So one is I think we need to be a little less guilty.
Yeah.
But then second, in some ways do what those people who sponsor NASCAR and provide people with new laptops will do. And that there are two things. One is to get stories. And a lot of times when I, again, do a major training journey, not a single event, and people do things in between, I get a lot of stories from them. What did you do? What was the impact that you had? There are times I'm able during graduation of these programs to get the senior leaders to come in and listen to the stories that the participants tell about the impact that the program had. And they sometimes can put an ROI on it. I remember this was just a couple of weeks ago, one person talked about influencing in a different way after going through the program and then working with someone right afterwards where he believed he was able to save $700,000 because of what he did differently than he would have done prior to coming to the program. And he told that story to the executives who were around the room. So if you think about just a couple of people saving that amount of money is going to be amazing. Also, if you do action learning, those action learning projects that are part of development in the right context, you can see a result from those projects. So you can get ROI light from those type of stories. The other thing we have is a tool we call Time to Change. It's a 360 tool that looks at behavior change. And we ask the participants first to identify what behaviors are you going to change because you were here. So they make that commitment on a behavior that they're going to change. Then we go back 3 to 6 months later and we have their peers, their direct reports, their bosses complete a survey that's asking them, what extent did you see a change in this person's behavior? And it's the behaviors they said they were going to change. So we're then able to go back to the organization and say, well, here's what people said they were going to do, and here's what people felt they did do. So we get that level 3 behavior change, and through stories, you can get some information about the Kirkpatrick level 4 ROI type of feedback.
Well, those are really terrific ideas, and I really like that idea of going back to people after and judging what they feel the change is. I'll just throw out an idea from my side, the
Right.
technique I use, which is a pre-assessment of
Mm-hmm.
people and their desire for change, for training.
Mm-hmm.
So what I find is that there are tons of people that want more training. So if you develop an assessment of the people, and one of the questions are, do you feel you can improve your performance at work with training? Do you want training? Then you have this sort of proven demand that can make a difference.
Yeah.
But I'm very impressed with the way you guys look at the world and see things, and jealous of your information, to be quite honest.
Thank you.
Let's talk about one last thing before we get into the offer and all those things, because one other thing. We're talking about ROI, we're talking about this, what it means, but one of the areas I think that training helps is retention, and maybe talk a little bit about that and the importance of that in terms of how management would look at training.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily sure that senior management will look at training as a retention tool, but it is. I mean, we know that it is. I mean, there's been a lot of research that say that people, the old Gallup comment that people don't leave companies, they leave bosses.
Yeah.
So developing the bosses in training will help the retention of their people. And retention is increased from the participants who go to those programs because you're not going to always get a promotion. You're not going to always be able to get ahead. And there's been a lot of research, ours and others, that say people want to be developed. People want to be paid attention to. If they feel they're being developed, they're going to stay longer in the organization. They're going to feel good about the organization. So absolutely, there's data to support that. From the participant point of view, there's certainly data to support that. If we can improve the bosses through training, that
Yeah.
they will have more retention in their workplace. I was working in China a couple of years ago in Beijing, where people were moving constantly because they're going to get another $20,000 if they move to this, or get a title if they move from job A to job B. And it was interesting. One person came to me after a program and said, you know what, I have an offer that's where I get a better salary and a better title in this company, but I felt so good that company X that I was working with took the opportunity to train me and to spend time with me and to spend money on me, that I think I'm going to stay and
Yeah.
not take that other offer. So that is just a very personal example of, I think, things that are going on in people's heads all the time.
It's interesting as I listen to you, because you live exactly what you recommended, because you talk about stories.
Mm,
And stories people can relate to,
right.
rather than just ramblings of, oh, of course it would do this. You shared an actual story, which is exactly the advice you earlier had given. So you're living it.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. You have a great offer for people, and knowledge to me is one of the greatest gifts, and your offer is around that. I'll let you tell about it, but would you please share your offer with everyone?
Yeah, absolutely. We, as I mentioned, that a part of Korn Ferry is the Korn Ferry Institute, where we have all these psychologists running around. And part of what we do we've done at the Institute is we've looked at just this question about how do people develop today, and how do you make training more effective and more powerful in today's world. And we have a series of white papers from the Korn Ferry Institute that will tell you how to do that, and what we've learned in developing people through development programs and through training programs. And with the URL, we're going to offer that to your listeners.
Well, I think that is fabulous. And it's great information for people to have. and to learn from. So I want to thank you very much. I want to say to all the people watching you, if you've enjoyed this and you have people that you know that maybe you would like to have them see it, that we do offer a download purchase option. Also, that there's sometimes some speakers that you didn't get a chance to hear that you would like to hear. Certainly, the download option is incredibly inexpensive. To have all 21 experts is a great value. Keith, I want to just end and say that I really enjoyed the interview. I learned as we went, which is great. A lot of respect for you and a lot of respect for your company. And thank you very much for participating. We really appreciate it.
Evan, thank you. I enjoyed it.
Great.
Bye now.
Bye.